Hello, everyone, and welcome. As we get settled in, we want to take a moment to say hello in the chat. If you're here and you are able to type into the chat, go ahead and say your highs. Hi, Kevin. Welcome. Thank you all for being here today. We have a new guest that replaced our original guests, Maurice and Grace, who are actually friends of Kim and I here in Atlanta. They will be coming back in February, so stay tuned for that. My name is Melisha Taylor, and I'm a professor of art, media, and design here at Cal State San Marcos, and instructor for AMD 380, Visionary Artists of Color, one of the courses that will be hosting this Resounding Visions series this semester. And we want to begin today's presentation with a land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that we are speaking to you tonight from the unceded territory of the Kumeyaay peoples, that our speaker, Kim Benz, and myself, we are on the lands of the Creek, and that the meeting place of Cal State San Marcos and its surrounding areas is still home to the 6 federally recognized bands of the La Jolla, Pala, Pauma, Pechanga, Rincon, Soboba, Luiseno people. And we would like to take this moment to acknowledge and express our appreciation and respect for those groups whose homelands we reside and learn on, recognizing that they are stewards of this land from time immemorial, in spite of the ongoing violence of settler colonialism. And given that we are not all together for this session, we invite you to look into those ancestral homelands that you reside on by consulting on the resources that I will post right now into the chat. If you visit the link that I just put into the chat, this will be a first step in recognizing the resilience and strength of Indigenous communities and expressing solidarity with efforts to undo their intentional erasure. So let us take a few quiet seconds to project solidarity as I share those resources. And we welcome you to the 4th session of Resounding Visions. This is a year-long series of BIPOC artists, musicians, and scholars who work at the intersection of sound and art to explore forms of cultural resistance and affirmation. The programming committee for this series includes faculty members Misael Diaz, Christine Diekman, Ana Luisa Petrisco, and Jeff Ray, and myself. We want to also extend a very special thank you to Steve and Laura Wagner and the Epstein Family Foundation for the generous funding that makes these events possible. And we also want to thank the School of the Arts staff, especially Robert Rascon, for their support. I want to also let you know, in lieu of actually, we're going to go ahead and continue in the chat. We do not have to be limited to Q&A, but if you'd like to share your questions in the Q&A, that will be great as well. We will have time for those questions after Kim's presentation, which is about 40 to 45 minutes. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for tonight, Kimberly Benz. Kimberly Benz is a multidisciplinary creative currently working in video, digital media design, and post-production editing. She holds a BFA from Georgia State University, and her background is in architectural design and video production. Her creative practice includes Her creative practice includes photography, drawing, painting, cinematography, and projection design. Homefront, a collection of works by Kimberly Binns, explores her thoughts on sanctity of the home of African Americans, what it meant to her personally in the midst of Corona lockdown, and how that idea exists within the historical context of government housing segregation policies, which in the early half of the 20th century mostly precluded Black families from participating in the most common action of foundational wealth building and security, home ownership. She considers how those policies continue to reverberate in the Black community through ongoing housing disparities and societal unrest, themes that were intensely highlighted during the months of COVID quarantine. She also celebrates the significance of her ability to cultivate her own home haven for herself and her family in the midst of constant uneasiness. To learn more about Kim Binns, visit her website at provenancemedia.net. And now please welcome Kimberly Binns.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much, Melisha, for that wonderful introduction. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here so I can see everyone. Yes, I'm Kimberly Binns. I appreciate all of you being here today, opening your hearts and sharing your time and receiving information and just receiving all the things today. So I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Yes, I am a multidisciplinary artist and I work in various media. Give me just a second, let me share my screen here. And thank you all for your grace and patience. Yes, I'm an interdisciplinary visual artist and creative producer, working in various media. I have just been so lucky to work with some amazing artists here in the city, and just been grateful to be a part of such meaningful collaborative work, which I'll be talking about a little bit today. And also sharing highlights from my most recent solo show, Homefront, which explores how the legacy of housing segregation continues to inform a lot of social injustices and societal inequities that we experience today. I want to start out giving gratitude. I have amazing people in my life, and I'm so grateful for that. I want to give honor to my father, who is deceased, but he is always with me. My mother, of course, Rose Lawson, who is just an amazing cheerleader in my corner. I have the most amazing friends, and I am forever grateful for all of their support and the many ways that they support me, whether it's, being a babysitter when I need it, being a kick in the pants when I need it, being a sounding board when I need it. So I'm lucky, so lucky to have my family, as I call them. To my life partner, Fabian Williams, who is also an amazing visual artist, but he has walked side by side with me on my creative journey and continues to push me in ways that sometimes I may be afraid to push myself. So I am grateful for him. And of course, my son, Kemet Magic Kofi Williams, who is an eternal light, and he keeps me going. And he's also an amazing studio accountability partner. I also want to give a special acknowledgement to Robin Burnett of Poem 88 Gallery. It is Robin who approached me about producing a solo show of this work. And, honestly, without her, I wouldn't have any content to show today. So I am really grateful to her and providing me a platform to share my voice and to share my visions. So I want to get started just by chatting a bit about creative self and the tenets of the creative self. I did not come from a background or a household that, put the creative arts as priority. We did not carve out time to go to galleries or visit museums or go to a show. So a lot of my artistic and creative sensibilities, I just learned to cultivate, or I did cultivate on my own. I did grow up in Washington, D.C., and the benefit of that is having the Smithsonian right at my doorstep. So I could pick any afternoon and go to the National Portrait Gallery or go to the Hirshhorn Museum of Contemporary Art, and just, experience a creative atmosphere in those venues. So that self-cultivation over the years has led me to have these tenets for myself, these creative tenets for myself. And one of those things is giving yourself permission. No matter what it is you're doing, if you're an accountant, if you are a roller skater, if you are a sculptor, if you are a pole vaulter, whatever it is, give yourself permission to be that. And I know sometimes it can be hard when you're up against, the regular forces of life and family and, maybe people wanting you to go in other directions or different directions that they think that you should go. Push back against that. Give yourself permission to be in that. Also give yourself permission to fail sometimes. Failure is a mark of growth. It is a mark of growth. If you're not failing sometimes, then you may not be doing it right. The benefit of failure is it invites innovation. It invites creative thought. It invites thinking about things in a more sensible way, maybe adjusting your sensibilities about things. And that's healthy. That's a healthy part of the creative process. Things won't be perfect, and that's okay. And sometimes you'll find there is perfectness in the imperfections. Having said that, lean into your gifts. You may find that those failures that you experience help you to define or reassess what your gifts are. And if that's the case, lean into that. I want to say that it took me a while to come into my creative self. I come from a, kind of a corporate background. So making a shift to working and thriving as a creative was a second shift for me. And I had to just kind of lean into all of the things that I do, right? And just accept those things and say to myself, okay, yeah, these are cool. I can do this. I can make something of it, and it's okay. As you're leaning into those gifts, I want to also point out that it is important to do all the things. That's a really, really important tenet for me. I'm one of those people who has my hand in a lot of different arenas. And I love to do lots of different things because I learn from everything that I do. And all of the disciplines that I'm into, they really do intersect one another. So doing all the things is okay. There's this old saying, master of everything, something, I don't know, fool me once, shame on you. But it is okay. It's okay to do all the things and just own that is part of who you are as a creative, and own that as part of your creative process. All right, so as Melisha mentioned, I do have a BFA in architectural design, which coincidentally, I don't think a lot of people realize that because I've been removed from doing this type of work day to day. But this is where my creative journey began. When I returned back to school to pursue a BFA, I always had a love for architecture and just the built environment. So that was my discipline. When I came out of that, it was kind of in the height of the housing crisis. So actually working, long-term with design firms and architectural firms, was not necessarily in the plans at that time. But what I did get out of the teachings and what I learned from this discipline is specific processes and technical skills that I've been able to transfer to the work that I do today. And I think it's important to, show my roots again, although I'm not in the space, there are remnants of, this very important time that is relevant to how I approach the work that I do. All right, so moving on to the power of process. Process is so extremely important, and process is one's own personal journey. As you see, I do a lot of things. I don't say no to a lot of ventures. I'm reupholstering, I'm painting, I'm working on a mural, I'm in my studio, I'm at a residency. But the power of process is that it's important as a fact-finding mission. It's often experimental, but it does help me to answer questions about the why of what I do. And of course, helps me to refine specific techniques. But what also happens is I can think about what I'm doing and how can I apply all of these things in a layered form that culminates into a body of work that is substantive and meaningful. So, I want to say another great thing about collaboration is it allows you to branch out. It allows you to push yourself into different arenas, maybe doing things that you didn't know you could do, maybe trying processes that you didn't understand that you knew before. And what you're seeing here is my first foray into doing any sort of animated work. These are some legacy projects that I did. These are from 2013, but they were both my first, it was the first time I animated illustrations. And it was very, very hard. It was so difficult, but I pushed through, and this was born out of previous collaborative works that I'd done with other artists, and they recognized that there was a skill set that I had, and they figured I could just do it. So having that energy, harnessing that energy is what collaborative work can do. You're not working in silos. You can't work in silos as a collaborative artist. You need that energy because those energies kind of invite other things into your process, into your practice, whether it's another gig, whether it's collaborating with some other artists. It's also manifestation. When you're collaborating, you're producing, and production is manifestation. Just some other examples of, again, how that collaborative energy made its way to me in a form of being able to try something new, some new processes. So I moved from this animation piece into projection mapping. I've done some work with some theaters here in Atlanta where I developed some video design and did projection mapping, which is basically digital set design. And again, this would not have come about had I not opened myself to these energies and had I not allowed myself to receive manifestation of other works.
When will the nonsense end? How much it costs? How many lives we spend? Add the time we serve, the centuries we work for free. 99 for your racist smirk. Now take what you paid the Jew. 40 acres in the mule? That's overdue. And what's that worth today? How much for the trauma in my DNA? It gave me that rumble, that Ali, that John Lewis, that good trouble. It's not black or white, it's gray and it's green. You disagree, you have been led astray. Because everybody agrees that it be just us. I don't even want the peace for just us. Maybe it's time to adjust us. No peace, no justice. Because everybody agrees that it be just us. And I don't even want the peace for just us. Maybe it's time to adjust us. No peace, no justice.
So what you just saw was one of the latest collaborative pieces that I worked on with my dear friend and fellow artist, Charmaine Minifield. She was part of a John Lewis dedication for Johns Hopkins University. And I produced, this is just an excerpt of a 10-minute video collage that I produced in honor of John Lewis. Again, receiving the energy of being able to just do my work and be creative and opening myself. No silos, harnessing necessary energy. This was a manifestation of other things that come before this. And it was an honor to be asked to work on this project, to honor this amazing man, John Lewis. And it was just really one of the highlights of a lot of the recent work that I've been doing. Another example of collaboration and another showcase of my ever-expanding sorry, my video is pausing there. I'll just let that play. So, I'll just pause that and just talk a little bit about what we're seeing here until the bandwidth gods, decide to shine on us again. So going back to collaboration, collaboration often leads to research of many disciplines and happy discoveries of information that either you didn't know or didn't know you needed to know. This particular project is part of an ongoing exhibition entitled Remembrance as Resistance, Preserving Black Narratives, which celebrates the tradition of the ring shout. And my work for this project included creating a visual collage, which is what you're seeing here. And that's taking historical imagery, manipulating it, and reimagining it in a current modern packaging of video and design. The still images that you're seeing are from the installation of this video, which took place inside of a replica of a traditional praise house where ring shouts were traditionally performed. And this was just a very, I'm trying to see if I can play this video again. Okay, well, that's okay, but you get the gist of it. We'll go ahead and move on. And but I do want you to, I wanted you to see that just so, you know, just so you're understanding that there is an evolution in the work. There is an evolution in the content and the imagery of the work. And that is what has really kind of gotten me to where I am now with my current body of work, excuse me, that speaks to the historical context of things, just the why of the issues that we're having and experiencing in society. And, you know, it's really giving me, it gave me ideas of how I could use my artwork and use my creative voice to highlight those injustices in an effort to inform or, you know, spark, you know, some conversation. And that's where we move to the power of study. I really enjoy knowing about things and learning about things because I don't believe that we exist in a vacuum. My curiosity fuels my creativity. And, you know, my learning is a layered process that involves seeking and finding and absorbing and synthesizing information. And the power of study is an integral component of my art practice. You know, what am I saying? How am I saying it? You know, how does it resonate? And why is it important? You know, it is pretty much the lifeline of my artistic practice in particular. What you're seeing on screen is just a sampling of many of the things that I came across in my research for my solo show. And let me just back up really fast. I was approached by Robin Burnett of Poem 88 to produce a show that initially the scope was to focus on photography that she'd seen on my Instagram feed. It was, you know, very sweet pictures of my home life. And, you know, she wanted to mount an exhibition that spoke to what that sanctity of home felt like in the midst of COVID. And it just so happened that I had already started working on a series about redlining and its practice and it's how it continues to reverberate today in all kinds of policies that affect Black people, communities of color, Indigenous people, poor people. And I decided to marry that piece of what I was doing with the work that she came to me that she wanted to present. So there is one book that I want you to take note of, and it's The Color of Law, this book right here. The work that I began to do about redlining was greatly influenced by the text of this book. Richard Rothstein is the author, and he basically lays out the groundwork of the government's effort to mandate racial segregation in housing. In effect, in many instances, creating segregation in housing where none existed before. A prime example is, and he talks about this early on in the book, so shortly after the World War II, workers were needed to, you know, in various factories and, you know, in the shipyards. And because there was a worker shortage, Black and white people were working together. And they worked together, but they also needed to live close by together. But the federal government, instead, when it came to building new housing to accommodate these new workers, the federal government would not insure or provide mortgages. They would not ensure the financing necessary to build housing for integrated communities. So housing units were built for Black people and separate units were built for white people. So there you have a case where there was an integrated community that existed. A new community did not follow that model. The new community was developed explicitly as a segregated society. So the name of the show is called Homefront. It's my first solo exhibition. And as I was doing research and finding out information about all these things and reading this book and coming across all kinds of texts and journals and archival imagery and interviews, it really got me thinking about what this work and what this art can be. And I've heard the term art activism, but I wasn't sure if what I was producing was that. And then when I really thought about it, what I'm providing is context. And I think that context in art is a form of art activism. It was just so important to me because, especially in the last administration, I don't need to rehash what we were going through, but it just really dawned on me that nobody was really talking about the reasons why we were experiencing just the extreme inequities, the racial strife, these killing. It was almost too much for me, and it got me thinking, okay, all these talking heads in all of this noise, I'm not hearing anybody talk about the reasons why we are where we are. So that was kind of the progenitor for developing the work as I did. You can read here, art activism is a dynamic practice combining the creative power of the arts to move us emotionally with the strategic planning of activism necessary to bring about social change. Activism moves the material world while art moves the heart, body, and soul. In fact, however, they are complementary. Social change doesn't just happen. It happens because people decide to make a change. And when I read this, and this is from the Art as Activism organization. There's Organization for Art as Activism. I believe that's the name. It's in my bibliography. But when I read that, it really resonated with me. So that is what I've come to kind of term my art as being. The show is a collection of works by me, and I really wanted to highlight not just how the sanctity of home felt in the midst of Corona lockdown, but how that idea exists within the historical context of government housing segregation. When you hear the reports about the evictions, the level of evictions that were happening, home ownership amongst Black people, Black communities, Black families tend to own their homes at a percentage that is so much less than white homeowners. And a lot of that is because there was no Black people were not allowed to participate in building foundational wealth. where, grandma had a home that she could borrow against to loan her granddaughter a down payment on a new home, right? So there was no path for us in many instances. The next slide I'm going to show is is the video installation from my show. And it runs about 5 minutes, but it really highlights kind of puts in a nutshell what the project is all about.
Yes, this is the market we're talking about, the new Negro family. Their name is Wells or Wilson, Smith or Brown or Alexander or Breen. They live in Chicago, in Atlanta or New York, in Detroit, St. Louis, Los Angeles, any one of 1,000 cities and towns. All over the country, families such as this are enjoying new prosperity. They have new interests, new standards of living, a buying power they've never enjoyed before. They're good prospects for practically all types of goods and services. All too often, though, they're overlooked prospects. Why? Because of some good, valid reason? No. They're overlooked because of mistaken ideas, because of out-of-date ideas about how the Negro lives and how he buys.
This is the story of one family's search for a new home. It begins where they live now, in this quiet suburban neighborhood of Teaneck, New Jersey. For the past 5 years, Corbett and Sally Rochelle and their 11-year-old daughter Alicia have lived in this neighborhood. Last July, they put their house up for sale and started looking for a larger house. Corbett Rochelle explained why.
Well, I think basically our reason for wanting to move into a better home is the same reason that anyone would want to move into a better home, and that is that we can afford a better place and we want a little more usable space than this house affords.
The Rochelle search began in the usual way with the local newspaper. Sometimes they made appointments to see houses. Sometimes they drove through neighborhoods first just to get a feeling of what they were like. And of course, they visited real estate agents in a large number of communities.
There really is pervasive discrimination in terms of rental housing, in terms of people who are trying to buy homes. They may do it in a very friendly way. They may direct you to a different kind of housing opportunity. They may say, oh, I suddenly have nothing available.
My reactions when a real estate broker starts to run down a town by saying that the prices are too high is that I don't know whether he's saying it because it is actually true or whether he is saying it because he wants to discourage me because I am a Negro.
All of the agents were polite, none were rude. Corbett Rochelle tells of one visit to an agent.
I went out alone one weekend because Sally my wife was at home showing our house. I went to one broker, and after I assured him that I could take care of the financial obligations, he said, you're the first Negro that has ever come in here looking for a house. And before I would be able to take you over, I would have to call them and let them know that you are colored and ask them if they mind showing to a Negro.
By any standard other than race, the Rochelles are eligible to buy the house they are seeking. Like many families in the growing Negro middle class, their income is higher, their education better, and they can afford better food, clothing, housing, and medical care than the vast majority of Negroes in the United States.
Our financial situation was good, that our credit was good. We both had good jobs, we both have good backgrounds. There was nothing that we could think of that would disqualify us from getting the best apartment that we could afford.
According to Webster's dictionary, a ghetto is that quarter of a city in which members of a minority group live because of social, legal, or economic pressure. Attractive as it is, this neighborhood, where the Rochelles have lived for the past 5 years, answers that description. Over the past 10 years, its composition has changed from all white to nearly all Negro. Whites no longer move in. Negroes, as the Rochelle story indicates, find it difficult to move out.
White people have moved out for varying reasons, of which most of the time they never give. They seem to feel that Negroes moving into an area has a tendency to depress property values.
It just seemed incredible to us that in this day and age in New York City, that someone would decide that we weren't qualified to live there because of our race.
So yes, that video kind of put it in a nutshell what this project is all about. And, I just wanted to show that 60 years later, really 100 years later, we were still dealing, with these inequities. And it's something that's been pervasive for decades. And we have a lot to do to try and shift that narrative. I'm going to go ahead and breeze through. I do have a couple of clips to show.
But I really feel like it's a very important aspect of just, our history and understanding. There is context to the injustices and things that we are experiencing and seeing today. And it is rooted in this idea that communities of color, Black folks in particular, are less than or not deserving, not capable of attaining a semblance of life that is sustaining, and it's simply not true. So that was the impetus behind me doing this work and creating this work.
So just as I said, there's a lot of context here, and I just felt that it was important to highlight that. This exhibition included a variety of vignettes. The furniture piece in the middle of the room is a homage to, not an homage, but a remembrance of Tulsa, the Tulsa massacre of 1921, which was the annihilation of a thriving independent Black neighborhood in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it was dubbed Black Wall Street, and because it was the wealthiest African-American community in the nation at the time. And it was burned to the ground by angry white mob of Klan members. This is just a detail of some of the work. And the processes that I used include digital work, digital collage, image transfer technique, hand image transfer technique, writing. All of these elements mean something. And here's a little bit about that installation.
What you're seeing here is a digital collage piece that I developed, and what's included in the imagery is a section of what's known as a community safety map, or a safety legend. And these maps and these color codes were used in the practice of redlining communities. So because the Federal Housing Administration would not grant mortgages or insure mortgages to redlined areas, which were always all Black communities, they used these maps to determine whether or not people could, whether or not they would insure a home mortgage. And that essentially, again, left all Black folks out of the wealth building economy, which is home ownership. And this was not just in the South, people. This was not just in Alabama. It wasn't just in South Carolina. It wasn't just in, this was nationwide, from Utah to California to New Jersey to North Dakota, like everywhere. This was everywhere. Again, I'm going to show you this. This is verbiage from the Federal Housing Administration. This is the official.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to.
One other piece I want
didn't mean
to
to
talk about.
cut that close. I know that we're running up on time, and there's so much more that I have, but I'm going to move ahead to my end slides and hopefully can answer some questions. There is a bibliography page that I would like to share.
In the middle of the room.
And it highlights all of the links and text and books that I used in my research here. These are the books here, The Color of Law. I do recommend you getting it if you're interested in housing inequities or understanding the history of that. And hopefully we can share this bibliography. Alicia, you can let me know that if anyone wants to access these texts and books themselves. And I'm pushing to the finish line, so here we are. If you do have any questions, if you want to know more, if you want to see some other things, if you just want to reach out, please get at me here at all of the things, Kim Bensat Studio. You can find me on IG. I have a Vimeo page. You can visit my Vimeo page as well. And
Wonderful, Kim.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. This was incredible. Students, thank you so much for listening and following along with us. I see a few questions in the
Mhm.
chat. Please drop your questions into the Q&A if you can, so that everyone can see and we can keep track of answered and dismissed or open questions. One question I have to start you off, Kim, I saw a slide that had San Diego on it.
That had what now? Oh, San Diego.
San Diego, which is where San Marcos is located.
Right.
Can you tell us about the history of housing in California?
Yeah, sure. So, as I mentioned, housing segregation really got its footing in shortly after the First World War, when there was a shortage of workers, and you had a lot of African Americans migrating from southern states to California for better opportunities. In their mind, less segregation, less racism, but that was not the case. So these policies in not just in San Diego, but in various cities and communities throughout California, even in the San Francisco area, the government, it was a multi-tiered effort. You had government at play, you had the real estate industry at play, and you also had just de jure segregation, de facto segregation in the way of redlining or racial covenants. Many communities, many subdivisions, and I guarantee you, if some of you go to your grandmom or even your mom's house and look at their deeds, there may be language in the deed that explicitly stated that that particular home could not be sold to a Black person ever, like it's in writing. And those were called racial covenants. And the redlining was a practice that the Homeowners Loan Corporation, which insured home mortgages, that's a map that they used to let people know, okay, well, this area is a dangerous area, it's a hazardous area, so we're not going to provide loans or insure mortgages in this area. And the those redlined areas in those cities and communities were always Black communities. And coincidentally, many of those redline communities were next to industrial sites. So even today, the biggest issue we all know about is Flint, right? The Flint water crisis. Well, the big part of why that is because communities of color and Black communities in particular were placed alongside industrial waste sites, where water quality was, it didn't matter what the water quality was, didn't matter what the air quality was, because Black people were living there. And they, you know, so those industries went unregulated because it wasn't affecting people who were important in their mind. So the map that you saw was a red line map from the Homeowners Loan Corporation. And again, they created these maps in cities across the country. California, Connecticut, Denver, Miami, Atlanta, of course, Chicago, St. Louis, just you name it, you name it. And that it's those practices that, again, just kind of kept, that led to the creation of ghettos, honestly, and again, kept Black families from being able to cultivate some semblance of generational wealth for themselves, for their families, for their loved ones, for their offspring. So that's what you saw.
Wow. Yeah, I'm wondering, I'm putting a question into the chat for folks. If you can name who in the class knows the redlined community that still exists in San Diego. If you can tell me that you know the name, drop it into the chat. I have another question. I have a question from Matthew. He asks, how did you get inspired?
Oh, it's a lot. I have a lot of lived experiences. And, but I think what really got me inspired was the social and all the unrest that we were all experiencing, the social unrest we were all experiencing, especially, within the last administration, the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, like just you go down the list, this is for all of them. And in particular, Breonna Taylor, just thinking about this woman is in her home where she's supposed to be safe, and she was shot dead. So it was like, it got me thinking, like, what was it about her community in particular that, made law enforcement automatically think that this was the type, that there would be some illicit activity going on, there would be some, something happening that was illegal. And a lot of it is just a holdover of attitudes, lingering attitudes about red line communities. Now, they might not be that right now on paper. You go to the county deeds office or whatever, you're not going to see literal red lines on the maps, but that history, that lingering history, is a holdover, and that holdover, gets into the minds and the attitudes of government agencies, law enforcement agencies. So they treat people in those communities differently because that's what they have been primed to do.
Right. Yes. And let's see, other questions. Can you speak a little more on your inspiration overall as an artist? Like, how did you get your start? And did you start in video? I know you said you did architectural design.
Right.
How did you go from design into video?
So it was a long segue. I've always had a background in photography, just kind of, doing it on my own. So my creative partner, Fabian Williams, he was producing a series, and he had some old videos that he needed edited. And he just basically, he asked me, he said, hey, do you want to learn how to edit? And I was like, yeah. So that's what I did. I just took the time, learned the craft, and from that started just working on videos for my friends, working on my own videos, just do wherever there was an opportunity for me to hone that craft. That's what I did. And as I mentioned before, you know, there was an opportunity for me to learn how to, you know, do some animation. So he's like, hey, do you want to learn how to do some animation? I was like, yeah. So he showed me, you know, what to do, and that's how I got into that. And it just kind of segued from there. So I've been slowly building my repertoire for several years. And, you know, I'm kind of in a space where I'm still defining my voice. I'm still defining my aesthetic. And I've moved into working with video collages. I really like interspersing. I really like using historical imagery, movies, photographs. I really like incorporating that into my work. And that really is what inspires me. You know, how can I put forth a different narrative, or how can I take this thing and have people look at it in a different way? But yeah, it was very organic for me. I didn't go to film school or anything. I had access to a camera and I just did it. I will say, you know, to those of you who are, you know, in that world, or you're looking to do it, I mean, nowadays the technology is such that you can honestly do some amazing things just with your phone. But if that's something you want to do, lean into that gift and do it.
Thank you. Yeah, you said a lot of beautiful and inspiring things at the start of your presentation, and I hope that all of our fellow artists in this class got to absorb all of that. And I know, like, your journey has been a mixture of different mediums, but also a mixture of different types of collaboration, which has enriched your path. And so I encourage all of you students to collaborate with other artists, especially artists that are not doing exactly what you do.
Yes.
Doing group projects is a step towards hopefully getting you guys to want to collaborate as well. I do that a lot in my classes, is like kind of get artists working with each other by the end of the class. So I definitely encourage you all to try that and to do that. Do we have any more questions for Kim about her process before we dismiss? I do think it's amazing watching you kind of take the 3D world and put like, and almost create like 3D on paper through like the dimensions of texture, the dimensions of color, and like the dimensions of collage. It's almost like you can think in a video way, and then you can think in like, if I made this into an exhibit, you still kind of collaging elements into like a one-dimensional format. It's like, I don't know how to explain it, but you're taking what you do in video and putting it like onto paper. Yeah. Or even, and even just like that furniture installation, it's kind of like going out and then coming in. You know, kind of expand and contract in your work a lot, which is very cool. Very, very cool.
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that acknowledgement. And it's true, you know, because it is a way for, this was an opportunity for me to showcase all the things that I do all the things. And that's what that's what I attempted. That's what I did in this show. I did all the things. So yes.
Yes, beautiful. There's one more question. Have you heard of environmental racism? And
of course.
Would you classify the Flint situation in Black neighborhoods near poor air quality as environmental?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. That is exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. And again, when you go back and you can find these maps, there's a collection of these maps. They are in different various areas, but in my bibliography, I do put a link to where you can find them. But you do, when you look at those red line maps, you'll see the red line communities and, maybe just to the west or just to the east or just somewhere adjacent to those communities, you'll see the hash marks for the industrial areas because they were right next door. They were right next door.
Yes. And everybody, to conclude, just so you all know, I had never heard of redlining until actually living in San Diego and getting involved in social justice and realizing like where all my Black friends lived. And all my Black friends in San Diego lived in the same area. And I was like, this is kind of weird. Like, why do all the Black people live here? And every time I visit someone, they live around the corner from each other. And I've never seen anyone Black outside of this area. What is that about? So then I go into this neighborhood that I've never been to, Paradise Hills Skyline, and I notice that there are no sidewalks in the majority of these areas. It's literally still dirt. Like you cannot actually walk your dog or jog in many parts of Paradise Hills and Skyline. They literally have neglected the streets.
Yes.
Like,
and
I don't know if you guys know what this area is, but when I talk about redlining, we're talking about neighborhoods that don't even really gentrify. And when they do, it's like miraculous, or like, oh, wow, there's a cafe suddenly, or there's an actual restaurant. We're talking about areas that have nothing, no Starbucks, no Ralph's or Vons, no like decent food. You got to drive 30 minutes to get, DoorDash is not coming to this neighborhood.
I'm telling you, Melisha, all the things that you're saying, it is not a hard stretch to say that this very thing that I'm talking about is the reason. That is the reason. There are no sidewalks because there's no infrastructure happening in the hood. That's a form of injustice. I can't walk my kids to school because there's no sidewalks. It's so pervasive. It's so pervasive. It's so ingrained in every, even I didn't even get to the highway system. That's going to be another body of work. But the highway system at its core is a racist policy because major highways split, in many cases, annihilated, demolished, split Black communities. You ever wonder, you go to some cities, you drive around and you got, this big highway. Why is this part of the neighborhood, this Black part of the neighborhood over here? And it's because the highways had no regard. They had no regard for Black communities. And if they needed space to put a road somewhere, they raised Black homes of Black families, and they put a highway in its space. This is not fake news. This is not conjecture. It is documented information. Anybody can go and research this and find this documentation.
Yes, guys. So please be informed. If you've never heard of this and this is your first day learning this, write it down, because this is the stuff that people protest about. And we always say, like, why are people still mad? Isn't racism over? This stuff is ingrained in our everyday lives. And if I cannot order, I literally cannot, in my neighborhood, there is not any food place I will eat at within 20 minutes of my neighborhood. I have to drive 30 minutes to eat. So just everybody know that this stuff is real, it's still real. And thank you for lifting up these topics, Kim, in your artwork.
Thank you. And I just want to, please get the book, read this book. It will just explain everything. And Richard Rothstein, he's got interviews online, talks online on YouTube you can find, and it will just give you clarity on all the things.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. All right, friends. Thank you all who were able to stay. Thank you for staying.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and hanging out.
Absolutely. So we will, yes, there's some thank yous there in the chat. we will go ahead and conclude if there are no more questions. Students, if you guys, I'm seeing all of your emails, so if you are continuing to have questions on assignments, your final notes are not due until midnight tonight. Thank you to those of you who did turn them in. But everything should be good. If you don't need anything, I will see you next class next Thursday. All right. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Albert.
Everyone, enjoy yourself. Thank you so much. I appreciate this time.
Absolutely.
Oh, wait, yeah, Thanksgiving is next Thursday. There's no class, Melisha.
Oh, yeah, there's no class. Turkey as evidence that there's no class next Thursday. So everyone have a wonderful time of gratitude and happy holidays to all of you. And I will see you after the Thanksgiving holiday. Bye-bye.
Bye.